Everyone was taken aback when this man showed up at the wedding. However, they were mute when he took the mic. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. John was a 40-year-old vagrant. All he can recall is waking up in a hospital almost 5 years prior. He wasn't even sure of his own name, but he was dubbed John by the medical staff, so he went by that. He was informed at the hospital that he had been discovered on the side of the road, barely alive. He seemed to have been thrown from a car that crashed and caught fire at the base of a cliff, killing everyone else inside but for himself. There was no more explanation for their link, and the other passengers in the car were all men. Although the physicians were aware that the accident had caused amnesia, they believed it was only a transient condition and that he would eventually retrieve his memory. When he was well enough to be released, they let him go with the expectation that he would return home because they were unable to locate his family because he did not have identification on him. But because he didn't know where home was, John chose not to go there. He spent hours waiting at the bus station the day he was freed, since he had no idea where to go. He boarded the last bus and got off at the final stop when it arrived. He met Ray there when she discovered him wandering the streets. When John said that he did, Ray, who had asked him if he needed a place to sleep, brought him to a gathering spot for the homeless near the bus stop. John was pleased with how kind everyone was and was taken aback to see so many tents in one area. They asked him questions for which he had no answers, but it didn't stop them from providing him with a bed. He eventually grew used to living like a homeless person as time passed. He was happy with his life until Ray showed him how to obtain the necessities. However, there was always a persistent thought in the back of his mind. His pre-accident existence was something he really wanted to know, but it eluded him. John could only recall that it was a song. Though he couldn't recall where he heard it, it always made him feel better. He was immediately referred to as John the Singer, since he had been singing the song every night since arriving at the homeless hub. They invited him to perform for them on evenings when they needed entertainment. However, he would only sing one tune, and they eventually became weary of hearing it. While searching for meals one day, John and Ray came upon an area where loud music was being played. John paused to listen, and he was soon joining in on the song. He was thrilled to recall anything from his past, and the lyrics were drawn from his recollections. After that, he went to the same location every day to listen to music. Though he rarely understood the words, he eventually picked up a few songs and began amusing the shelter patrons with them. A buddy of his once advised that he start singing to get money. He began charging $1 for each request once everyone gave their approval. He saved money to purchase a guitar because, for some reason, he thought he could play it. John, the vocalist, rose to prominence. Every time, he would sit on a sidewalk and wear a cardboard around his neck that said, "Make your song request and I'll grant your wishes for $1." Every time, John brought his profits to the shelter so that they might be divided. Although John appeared content in his new life, there was always the unanswered issue regarding his background. A couple was arranging their nuptials just across the nation. May and Ryan had gone above and above to make sure everything about their wedding was ideal. To have their fairy tale wedding, they had put off the event for years. It was all part of their ideal, so they purchased the luxury clothes and even organized the destination wedding. But as the wedding day drew nearer, May began to experience sadness. She had fantasized as a child of having her father escort her down the aisle, but he was not present, so she was unable to share the important occasion with him. By pretending to be their dad, her brother attempted to lift her spirits, but it wasn't the same. They flew to the wedding location 2 days before to the event to put everything up. However, the band that was scheduled to perform that evening informed them that their flight had been delayed and they would not be able to arrive in time for their wedding. May found it hard to believe. If they could find someone to sing, her ideal wedding would be destroyed. A DJ was proposed by her friend, but none was available. Then someone proposed using their phone to create a playlist of music for the wedding team and plugging it into the speakers. May couldn't bear the thought of it and started crying, but she had no choice but to comply. Following the resolution of the music issue, the groom and his pals celebrated the Bachelor's Eve in the town. They heard a homeless man sing to a gathering of people while they were traveling. The groom had an epiphany after hearing his thunderous voice. After handing the man $1, he approached him and requested him to sing a wedding song. The guy spoke, filling the room. The homeless man said yes when Ryan, the groom, asked him if he would want to perform at the actual wedding the next day. The groomsman went to the homeless man's regular site the next day to pick him up. His name was John. Despite his best efforts, his clothing were soiled and outdated. The groomsmen bought him an outfit since they knew he wouldn't have anything good to wear. He still appeared rather haggard with his long hair and disheveled beard, but he looked better. When it was time for the bride and groom to dance, they instructed him to come on stage and sing. The bride was unaware of the surprise the groom had planned for her until just before the wedding celebration, but she was at a loss for ideas. She watched a man with a guitar come on stage when it was time for their first dance. A few visitors, including May, were uncertain about his presence. They were really a little taken aback and questioned the identity of this scruffy-looking dude. However, the man opened his mouth and started singing before May could become agitated once more. He had a wonderful voice. May was ecstatic and taken aback. Ryan was happy too. He didn't respond when May persisted in asking where Ryan had found him. "Don't worry, my love," he murmured. "Let's have fun." The crowd asked for more songs when John finished the first one. The song he recalled from his past, the only tune he had sang at the shelter at start, was the first song that sprang to mind. The bride abruptly stopped dancing as he picked up the microphone and started to sing. Taking a close look at the homeless man, she exclaimed, "Dad!" Her dad had written this song just for her, which was why she'd asked. When she was younger, they had both sang it a lot. All in the bridal hall was bewildered, but as she drew nearer, a flicker of recognition appeared in her eyes. She ran to give him a hug and started crying. Her brother and mother walked up to the stage. Woman makes fun of elderly man while flying, without knowing who he is. The normal buzz of the engines and the whispers of passengers getting comfortable in their seats filled the cabin of the aircraft. Mrs. Harrow, a young, well-dressed white woman, was standing in the aisle, her finger pointing accusingly at an old black man who was seated near the window and her face contorted with contempt. With a tone full of disdain, she said, "I will not sit next to this man." As people turned to watch the altercation play out, the temperature in the plane seemed to decrease. Marcus, the old guy, had arrived on the airplane with minimal fanfare. He had retired as an African-American history professor, and he was on his way to a symposium to receive recognition for his services to the subject. Despite encountering bigotry several times in his life, Marcus maintained his composure. The only offense he committed today was sitting next to Mrs. Harrow, who felt he wasn't worthy of first class. The flight attendants hurried to defuse the situation as Mrs. Harrow carried on her rant. One of them said, "Please, let's all take our seats and discuss this calmly." But Mrs. Harrow was certain in her decision. "He most likely can't afford this seat." She said, "He could take anything from me." Those around her were horrified by her unfounded claims. Keeping his composure, Marcus grabbed his phone and started live streaming the interaction. He was aware that in the era of digital technology, information may travel swiftly and expose injustice. His voice a calming counterpoint to her harshness. "Ma'am, I'm just here to travel, same as you," he remarked quietly. Mrs. Harrow's face was a mask of fury as she crossed her arms. She said, "I don't believe you. People like you don't belong here." Marcus groaned and gave a little shake of his head. "And what kind of people are those, ma'am?" "You understand exactly what I mean," she shot back, her voice getting louder. "This is first class, not the back of the bus." The flight attendants looked at each other nervously, not knowing just how to react to the rapidly worsening situation. A young woman called Sarah was one of them, and she moved forward. "Please, ma'am, let's attempt a diplomatic resolution to this. If you're not comfortable, we can locate you a different seat," Mrs. Harrow argued. "I shouldn't have to move. He should be the one to go." With composed and determined gaze, Marcus turned to face Sarah. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm perfectly allowed to be here." Sarah acknowledged Marcus's position with a nod. "Obviously, sir. Everyone, please try to maintain your composure." While Marcus was live streaming the event, he was reminded of his late wife Clara and how she had always pushed him to confront bigotry with grace and respect. He reminisced about their numerous trips together and how, despite discrimination, they had always faced the world together. The tension in the cabin increased as Mrs. Harrow leveled her charges. She immediately cried out, her voice falsely indignant, "He's stolen my watch! I demand the police be called!" Her remarks reverberated throughout the cabin, serving as a sobering reminder of the huge gaps in the advancement of society. The passengers looked at one another nervously, not knowing where to look. A man seated a few rows back got to his feet. "I saw everything," he said. This man remained seated on his chair. Nothing was taken by him. Mrs. Harrow gave him a fierce look. "Mind your own business." The man firmly said, "It is my business when someone is falsely accused. You should be ashamed of yourself." Marcus's live broadcast captured every minute as the crisis worsened. Supporting and indignant replies flooded the comments area. One remark said, "Marcus, we stand with you." "This cannot be tolerated," stated someone else. He received support from the digital community, whose voice became stronger by the moment. In response to Mrs. Harrow's unfounded charges, police officers boarded the plane as soon as it touched down. Standing tall and confident that her falsehoods would be proven true, she exulted. "At last, take this man into custody." She said, "He's a liar and a thief." Instead, the cops came up to her after learning about it from Marcus's live video. "Ma'am, we need to talk to you about your accusations," an officer said sternly. Everyone in the cabin became silent as the gravity of the situation descended upon them. Marcus experienced both relief and regret. Although he hadn't intended to engage in this conflict, he felt he had to oppose such overt bigotry. His mind shifted to all the children he had guided throughout the years, hoping this episode would teach them the value of bravery and moral rectitude. The passengers stared in disbelieving silence as Mrs. Harrow's facade shattered and Marcus's phone revealed the inevitable truth. Her victorious face gave way to a defeated one as the cops led her off the aircraft. Marcus was shook, but he didn't lose his cool. His calm strength was a ray of hope. "I appreciate you standing up to her," a fellow traveler leaned down and said in a whisper. "You carried it off so elegantly." Marcus nodded, resolve and tiredness mixed together in his gaze. "It's not easy, but it's necessary." When the incident's video went viral, there was an outpouring of sympathy for Marcus and disapproval of Mrs. Harrow's behavior. After being covered by media, the incident swiftly came to represent the continuous fight against racial discrimination. Marcus was commended for his cool-headed and respectful answer, and he was asked to share his story on a number of venues to spread the word about respect and tolerance. Following the incident, Marcus got a lot of responses from individuals who were impressed by his calmness and fortitude. The symposium organizers reached out to him and conveyed their admiration and support. Marcus's narrative served as a reminder of the value of sticking up for what is right and the strength of truth, in addition to bringing attention to the ubiquitous problem of racial discrimination. Marcus thought back on his journey to this point as he readied himself for his symposium address. Knowing that his acts had started a worthwhile discourse gave him a new feeling of purpose. His late wife Clara, whose steadfast support had always been his beacon of hope, was honored with a speech devoted to her. Marcus observed the audience from the podium on the day of the symposium. Taking a deep breath, he addressed the group, aware that his words and deeds may have an impact. He felt Clara next to him as he talked, a reassuring reminder that he was never fighting this battle alone. Marcus said in a strong and firm voice, "The tragedy on that plane served as a vivid reminder of the work that still has to be done, but it also demonstrated the possibility of change. The truth, no matter how difficult to accept, may shine through the shadows thanks to social media's ability to magnify the voices of people who oppose injustice." Touched by Marcus's comments and his steadfast dedication to justice, the crowd listened carefully. The gathering exploded in cheers as he finished his address, a standing ovation that highlighted the significance of his words. With determination and thankfulness in his heart, Marcus walked down from the podium. Although he was aware of the difficult path ahead, he he was prepared to carry on the struggle for respect and equality. He felt a newfound feeling of optimism and resolve, with the support of innumerable people and Clara's memory serving as a beacon. For everyone who attended the symposium, including Marcus, it turned out to be a pivotal moment. His experience was a potent reminder that any bravery, no matter how modest, may make a significant difference in a greater movement for change. With the awareness that his trip was far from done, Marcus departed the stage, but that he wasn't the only one seeking to create a society that was more compassionate and just. This tale serves as a potent reminder of how pervasive racism still is and how crucial it is to confront it with grace and respect. Marcus, a retired professor, experiences overt prejudice but handles it coolly and resolutely, utilizing contemporary technologies to reveal the unfairness. His deeds inspire a surge of solidarity and demonstrate the power of honesty and morality. We discover that racial discrimination still persists and that it may show up anywhere. Marcus responded with dignity and composure, setting an example for how to deal with similar circumstances. His live feed became viral, demonstrating the ability of social media to hold people accountable and draw attention to injustices on a large scale. This event also emphasizes how important it is to keep up the fight against discriminatory thoughts and actions. It makes us think about what we've done and how important it is to support people who are discriminated against. If you had been in Marcus's shoes, how would you have handled the situation? What is the extent to which social media may be used to counteract bias, and what are its limitations? Policeman stops a black officer. He never looks back once he rolls down his window. Officer Jack Thompson was out on his routine patrol in the little village of Riverton. It was a calm evening, the type when the occasional speeder or someone running a stop sign was the main source of excitement. Jack had been a police officer for more than 20 years and had seen it all. He took great satisfaction in his intuition and his capacity to understand people and circumstances. But those gut feelings would take him to an event that would change his life tonight. There had been prior complaints about Jack's alleged racist harassment, particularly directed at local black neighbors. He had received many warnings due to his reputation for profiling, yet he always avoided facing significant repercussions. But tonight, his unbridled prejudices will finally catch up with him. Jack saw an older model BMW traveling marginally over the speed limit as he drove along Main Street. The man driving, who was black, appeared to be rushing. Jack became suspicious. There had been a few break-ins in this area lately, so he was suspicious of a black man driving an expensive automobile at night. He made the decision to look into it. After turning on his lights, Jack stopped the BMW. With his palm resting on his holstered gun, he exited the cruiser and radioed in his location. As Jack got closer, the driver looked up looking surprised and then a little frustrated. "Good evening, sir," Jack remarked in an impartial voice. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" With a sigh, the man inhaled deeply. "No, policeman. Why did you stop me?" Jack's eyes became a little narrower. "You exceeded the posted speed limit. May I view your registration and license?" The man gave a slight squint, but he obliged, taking out his wallet and giving his license and registration. "My name is Emmanuel Adams. I was on my way home from my office." Jack looked at the paperwork carefully, but she wasn't convinced. "Step out of the car, Mr. Adams." Emmanuel's face became stern. "Is that really what's needed? Nothing I've done has gone wrong." "That's standard procedure," Jack firmly retorted. "Step out of the car." Emmanuel reluctantly left the room. Jack gave him a cursory frisking before indicating the cruiser. "I'll check your information. Stay at this place." Pulling out his phone, Emmanuel made a call as Jack headed back to his car. "This is Emmanuel. Hello, Mark. And police is pulling me over and acting as like I'm a criminal. Could you please visit the station?" Chief Mark Reynolds of the police department, on the other hand, saw right once how urgent the situation was. "Emmanuel, I'll be right there. Remain composed." Unaware of Emmanuel's call, Jack came back. "You're arrested for obstructing the administration of justice," he said, grabbing his handcuffs. Defiantly, Emmanuel lifted his hands. "What? I haven't taken any action." "Don't mislead me. You were pushing back," Jack angrily said. When Emmanuel spoke up, he began to cuff him. "You're committing a grave error. I'm close friends with the police chief." Jack sneered. "Yes, exactly. I find it hard to accept that a person such as yourself is close to the chief." Emmanuel was pushed violently into the cruiser by Jack, who drove to the station as his mind raced with ideas that confirmed his suspicions. Jack was taken aback to find Chief Reynolds standing there, obviously enraged. The chief yelled, "Officer Thompson, what the hell is going on?" Jack sought to justify himself. "This individual was attempting to struggle and elude, sir. He attempted to flee and was disrespectful." With composure, Emmanuel took a little gadget out of his pocket. "Chief, my automobile has a dash cam. Everything was captured on tape." When the chief seized the gadget and showed the tape, Jack's face became pale. It was evident that Jack had been unnecessarily aggressive and had arrested Emmanuel. "Jack," said the chief in a chilly tone, "you've crossed the line for the last time." The proof was unquestionable. The following several weeks passed quickly. Jack was sued by Emmanuel for wrongful arrest and racial profiling. The community was outraged when the dashcam footage was made public. Jack received a lot of criticism. His past grievances were unearthed, and this time there was no turning back the repercussions. His career was ruined when he was let go from the police department. In the meanwhile, Emmanuel's case brought attention to the Riverton Police Department's need for reform. Following a comprehensive investigation prompted by the complaint, new training initiatives and procedures were developed with the goal of eradicating racial prejudice. In addition to practicing law, Emmanuel became an activist for civil rights, utilizing his background to drive legislative changes. In addition to altering his life, his meeting with Jack Thompson ignited a campaign for equality and justice in Riverton. Jack, on the other hand, had to face the consequences of his conduct. Though tough, the lessons he acquired were essential. He came to see that his prejudices had rendered him blind, causing him to act unfairly and harm innocent people. Ultimately, each of the soldiers was a character in a far bigger drama, one that was being written every day. The interaction marked a sea change and offered hope for a more equitable and better future. The little village of Riverton has changed significantly. A civil rights task group had been monitoring the police department, and it had started making long-needed adjustments. All officers were required to wear body cameras, and frequent training sessions on de-escalation and racial sensitivity were implemented. In order to make sure the modifications were actively implemented rather than only put on paper, Chief Reynolds took the initiative. The neighborhood became aware of the change. Racial profiling complaints declined, and the people the police served developed a cautious but growing sense of confidence. As a well-known person in the community, Emmanuel kept up his dual roles as an advocate and a lawyer. He frequently gave speeches at town hall meetings, discussing his personal story and highlighting the significance of justice and responsibility. His presence served as a constant reminder of the potential for change, and his voice held weight. Emmanuel received an invitation to give a speech about civil rights and the value of speaking out against injustice at a nearby high school one evening. Teachers, parents, and kids crowded into the auditorium. Using both his own experience and the longer history of civil rights fights, Emmanuel gave a stirring statement. His final words to the youthful crowd were one of optimism and exhortation, urging them to stand up for what's right. One of the young black students approached him after the lecture. "Mr. Adams, I was really impressed by your narrative. To assist others and change the world, I also want to practice law." Emmanuel grinned, seeing the tiny child as himself. "It's fantastic. Recall that although this route is noble, it is not simple. Never be afraid to ask for help if you need it." Jack Thompson had time to consider his conduct since he was now unemployed and faced legal ramifications. His reputation was destroyed, and there had been a strong outcry from the public. As part of his legal settlement, he had to go to mandated therapy sessions, which he originally refused but eventually found to be insightful. During a session, a counselor made him face the consequences of his prejudices. "Jack, it took more than one terrible night to justify your conduct. They belonged to a pattern. You must acknowledge the hurt you've done and make an effort to alter those deeply held beliefs." Jack took some time to grasp, but eventually he did. After contacting a support group for ex-law enforcement personnel, he got in touch with other people who had to deal with comparable situations. The group meetings were challenging, but healing, enabling Jack to face his history and begin the process of reconstructing his life. Additionally, he worked with at-risk adolescents in community centers as a volunteer, getting personal knowledge of the difficulties they encountered. It was eye-opening to be exposed to many viewpoints. Jack had a broadening perspective on the world and saw the value of justice and empathy. After years of hostility and mistrust, Riverton began to recover. The endeavors to restructure the police force and enhance ties with the community were yielding positive results. This shift was largely attributed to Emmanuel's advocacy and Jack's redemption tale, which stood for the potential for growth and peacemaking. There was a resurgence of solidarity and local companies started to flourish. After declining attendance in previous years, the annual town fair was suddenly humming with activity. People from various walks of life gathered to celebrate their community, laughing, eating, and telling tales. Emmanuel saw the happy spectacle from the throng. He was really satisfied that the challenging path he had gone through had resulted in significant transformation. While Riverton was far from ideal, it was moving in the direction of being a more equitable and welcoming community. Chief Reynolds called Emmanuel as dusk was falling over the fairgrounds. "Emmanuel, I wanted to express my gratitude once more for everything. Your bravery and tenacity allowed for all of this to happen." In response, Emmanuel said, "Chief, we did it together. This is only the start. Though there is still much to be done, I think we're headed in the right direction." It was then that Emmanuel understood meaningful transformation required a team approach. It takes bravery, persistence, and a readiness to face hard realities. The tale of Riverton served as a monument to the strength of one person banding together to fight for equality and justice. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.